Being an MMA fighter is a pretty dangerous job. There's a lot of punches, kicks, and elbows flying in your direction, and almost every day of your life you have to deal with someone trying to pick you up and drop you on your head. It doesn't take a genius to work out that injuries are going to be pretty common and understandable, and if it leads to a fight being cancelled, well, that sucks. But as fans, we can deal with it. Unless, of course, an injury happens in an absolutely ridiculous, hilarious, or dumb way, then we either just laugh or get annoyed at how something so impossible could have ruined our Saturday night. I'm Balian from MMA On Point. Thank you to all of you Hall of Famers out there. We appreciate all that support. And these are the dumbest ways fighters have injured themselves. Anthony Pettis' thumb. So some of these injuries are more self-inflicted than others, but let's start with one that happened during a UFC pay-per-view week before a highly anticipated matchup between Nate Diaz and Anthony Pettis. For Showtime, apparently fight camp had been going great, everything was looking awesome, we were all ready for an epic contest between these two UFC legends, but just an hour and a half before he was set to walk to the cage, he had to do a USADA-approved piss test. Nothing too strange there, but what happened next was pretty stupid.
I do the piss test, I'm closing the first bottle up, that's like a twist cap, so I'm twisting the cap. I put it in a plastic bag and I see blood, man. I'm like, what the fuck? And I look at my hand, I gash my thumb on the USADA drug test.
Yeah, just 90 minutes before showtime, Pettis must have been given a dodgy bottle or something because the piss container lid sliced up his thumb.
I had to make a decision 1 hour before my fight. Like, my coach is like, no, we're not fighting. And in my head, I'm like, man, like the cuts on my thumb, like, they're not going to stop a fight for blood on my thumb.
Compared to what we're about to get into in this video, okay, this one isn't too bad, but Anthony couldn't even warm up backstage because of it.
So now I went out there with no warm-up, and you could see it in the fight, man. I just went out there and I shit the bed, bro. Like, I was in my head on that fight.
Vitor Belfort's hand. UFC 33 back in the day was one of the most important events in the early years. It was the first year that Zuffa and Dana and friends had taken over, and this event was supposed to be a culmination of all of their hard work. And they were going back on cable television, ahead of a major venue in Las Vegas. They even had Tito Ortiz in the main event, who was probably the biggest star at the time, and they put him up against the phenom Brazilian prodigy Vitor Belfort. It was going to be one hell of a fight, alright? But of course, the dumb injury curse strikes again. As Vitor was training, he did something almost impossibly stupid. While working the heavy bag at the gym, he threw a punch, missed, and put his arm straight through a window.
That's a lot of blood. That's a lot of blood.
I don't know how you do that. I mean, who the hell puts a heavy bag next to the window? Apparently it was cut to ribbons and Belfort was completely out of the fight. And then they replaced him with Vladimir Matyashenko. And of course, UFC 33 went on to instead be one of the worst events of all time, with the pay-per-view cutting out about halfway through the main event anyway. CB Dollaway's back. Okay, so this is kind of a crazy one that was also totally not the fault of CB Dollaway, but it doesn't really make it any less of a dumb situation. Dollaway was a UFC veteran who first made an appearance on The Ultimate Fighter, but this story happens 10 years into his UFC career. Now, UFC 203 Fight Week, CB got into an elevator with a bunch of other UFC athletes, and then the elevator just went crazy, like haunted house crazy. I think Yancy Medeiros tells it best.
We were all catching the elevator up, and like for final destination, just started dropping, and then we didn't know if we were going up or down, and then we were all talking like, whoa, that was crazy, and then bam, we just hit, and well, there's a bunch of men in there, so he couldn't be acting like a girl.
Not saying CB was acting like a girl, but after the incident, he noticed something wasn't quite right with his back. He ended up pulling out of that fight at 203 and was sidelined for over a year and a half with back issues that the doctor said were permanent. Of course, he sued the hotel and did eventually return to action, but still, man, not even elevators are safe for a UFC fighter. I mean, sheesh. Yuri Prochazka's shoulder. Now, this one's a more recent injury that ended up changing the trajectory of the UFC's light heavyweight division, albeit temporarily. Now, initially, this isn't some kind of dumb accident. This happened while training for an upcoming title defense against Glover Teixeira. Yuri was just rolling around and injured his shoulder.
It was a sparring session. Everything was light. I let the guy to take my back, and he just threw me for the suplex right to the shoulder. That was that.
Now, there's nothing too crazy going on there, but instead of going straight to the hospital or a sports therapist, one of Yuri's training partners offered to help / pretended to know what he was doing.
The shoulder was out, and one Russian guy, he put me that shoulder back. After that, we went to the hospital.
It wasn't until Dana had the UFC doctors look at him that they found out it was the worst shoulder injury they'd ever seen. Apparently that Russian guy at the gym didn't put it back in, but instead ripped the shit out of it, causing way worse damage.
The doctor literally said, in all the years at the UFC, this is the worst shoulder injury we've ever seen.
Paige Van Zandt's foot.
Settle down.
12-gauge Paige was a lot of fun to watch in her early UFC career, then she kind of entered the elite of the division and struggled against top competition and eventually moved on to more lucrative things. Still, though, when she was actually competing and training for fights, she gave herself a nasty foot injury that prevented her from training for several weeks, and it's all because
whenever I drop something, I immediately try to catch it with my foot. I'm in the shower and I drop my brand new giant conditioner. Instinct, go in, try to catch it with my foot so it doesn't break all over the ground.
Turns out dropping things on your feet in just general is never a good idea, alright? Not sure what Paige was thinking or how much time she spent practicing her foot catching skills before that, but yeah, this was pretty stupid. Cowboy Cerrone's entire body. Look, I couldn't help but give Cerrone an entry for his entire body. I mean, really depends on what you consider dumb. I mean, riding an ATV around a track at high speed until you impale yourself on it seems pretty dumb, but I'm sure he was having fun right up until that happened, and that was only one of the many injuries Cowboy's picked up outside of a UFC cage. Breaking his hand over half a dozen times, but never while fighting, pretty much says it all. I mean, he's had his lips split open by a headbutting horse. He had broken 24 ribs, which I'm pretty sure means he's broken all of them twice. I don't know. In 2013, he fell 40 feet while rock climbing when 4 of his rope anchors fell out. Even after retiring, he managed to tear 100% of his bicep while getting ready to ride a bull at Dana White's extreme sports thing.
Like first thing out, it was like a sharp pain all into my eyeball. I was like, ooh, that's different.
I'm pretty sure this man is the sole reason the UFC implemented a clause in their contracts preventing fighters from doing ridiculously crazy shit outside of the cage, because it just ends in really dumb injuries like this. Kevin Randleman's head. One of the best and early pioneers of wrestling in MMA, the monster Randleman beat some top competition early on in his career. He wasn't given the nod against Baz Rutten for the heavyweight title, but then a few months later, he came along and won it anyway against Petey Williams. Then he was supposed to defend it for the first time against Pedro Hizzo at UFC 24. They even called the event First Defense. But of course, because those names are cursed, he didn't get a chance to defend his title. No, what instead happened was while backstage warming up, he slipped on some exposed pipe and cracked his head open on the concrete floor. So he knocked himself unconscious, and instead of going into the cage, he was going to the hospital. Yeah, it's a pretty dumb thing for a main event champion to do backstage. Ray Elby's manhood. Okay, quick heads up for this one, as it's pretty bad. Probably worse than you can imagine. Ray Elby was a US regional MMA veteran who, in 10 years, had competed over 40 fights, ending on a 6-fight win streak, which isn't at all bad. But while on a romantic getaway in Malaysia with his girlfriend, he had quite possibly the worst day of his life.
Was having intercourse with my girlfriend, came out the top, and as it came down, ended up breaking, fracturing my penis bone. It's actually possible, guys.
And yes, he fractured his penis. Yep, just by doing what Mother Nature intended, he suffered an injury that left him passed out and in danger of bleeding out. He initially didn't think anything was wrong, really, and waited before going to the hospital, something he massively regretted, and that's the reason he decided to share this story with everyone in the first place. For an MMA fighter, I don't know, it seems like a pretty ridiculous way to cause yourself an injury, to be honest. Terrence McKinney's knee. There's lots of ways to make a UFC debut, obviously, but T-Rex Terrence McKinney's goes into the category of spectacular instant knockout, along with Makwan Amirkhani and Ryan Jimmo. Now, Jimmo had a great celebration after that 7-second KO. The robot, that shit was iconic. And Terrence, he tried to do the same thing, have a little celebration after his UFC debut, and he came out and dusted Matt Frivola in 7 seconds.
So I went to jump on the cage, and when I went down, I landed on my leg, my toe, and buckled my knee. Oh, damn it, I wish I didn't do that.
I mean, that's a shame. I guess the guy was just super excited. Kevin Lee's ACL. Well, talk about celebrating after the fight to cause yourself an injury, but what happens if you do it before the bell was even sounded? Now, apart from trying to figure out where Kevin Lee fits into everything, he had spent 7 years battling through the UFC roster before he was finally cut in 2021. Just one win, though, at Eagle FC against Diego Sanchez, and he was back in the big show, the UFC. However, even in that fight against Diego, things did not go perfectly. Kevin's been through some wear and tear, and with the first leg kick he ate, he blew out his ACL again.
Yeah, it was the very first kick. He landed it, and I stepped back and I threw something, and then my whole leg kind of shifted.
But Kevin Lee was heading back to the UFC, and literally as he's walking into the cage, Laura Sanko is talking about how Kevin is now finally healthy. He did his usual pre-fight jump up and stomp, and he blew out his ACL. Honestly, you have to feel bad for Kevin. I mean, he worked so hard to get back to the UFC, and then he injured himself doing some kind of pre-fight dance entrance celebration. It's just so unfortunate and inescapably dumb. Jamal Hill's ankle. Yuri vacating the light heavyweight title because of a shoulder injury, that was pretty dumb. But we did get a new champion out of it in sweet dreams, but the injury bug wasn't done biting yet because it wasn't long before Hill also injured himself, and it was even more ridiculous than what happened to Yuri.
As you know, recently I tore my Achilles. It was a complete rupture.
It sounds pretty bad, right? So what happened? Well, it all started at a basketball game with other UFC fighters.
Look at DC, look at DC. Hey!
Look, there's nothing wrong with a bit of friendly sports competition among other UFC fighters. That is until your light heavyweight champion ends up rupturing their Achilles.
Hey, yo, something hurt right here, though.
But my man was out a championship belt, a title fight, and a perfectly good Achilles tendon, all because of a basketball game. TJ Dillashaw's shoulder. The MMA career of Dillashank, Dillasnake, Dillashark is a pretty interesting one, okay? Taking the belt in an incredible underdog fashion and then leveling up into one of the best strikers on the roster and then popping for drugs and being plagued by a series of never-ending injuries. It's a story as old as time. At first glance, you probably think that there's nothing dumb about those injuries though. Unless, of course, you count training out of Sam Calvia's garage as just a bad idea in the first place. I mean, his strength and conditioning program is fucking insanity, apparently. Obviously, we've seen how bad TJ's shoulder is. When he fought Aljamain Sterling, it immediately popped out, and according to doctors, it's pretty much screwed.
Every doctor I've met, like the world specialist on my shoulder, they're all telling me they can't put me back good enough to be able to fight again.
But how it got injured in the first place is one of the dumbest stories ever.
I fully blew out my shoulder playing the fucking coach's challenge. And it's on a balance beam, okay? So we're above a pool on a balance beam, like a gymnast balance beam, and I fall off the balance beam and I go to catch myself and I dislocate my shoulder out the back.
Yeah, I mean, absolute world-class champion in his prime has his career derailed by a total wipeout course, basically. Daniel Cormier's back. After a lifetime of wrestling, I don't want to even know what kind of shape your body's in. You know, Daniel Cormier went to the Olympics and back and then into MMA for 10 years, and I'm sure after training with Cain Velasquez for most of that, he's got a few injuries. The thing that seemed to come up a lot, though, were issues with his back, but he seemed to have most of that under control until the most unlikely of things happened, and he once again injured himself.
I hurt myself this morning bad.
On the morning of a pay-per-view fight, no less, where he was defending his title, Daniel Cormier woke up ready to fight Derek Lewis, and in truly dumb fashion, sneezed and threw his back out.
And this morning I sneezed, and I slipped my back out, guys. I was hurting bad. Bob Cook was all, if you don't get better, then we're gonna have to make a decision on whether or not you're gonna fight.
Now this is kind of even more ridiculous, as just a few months before at the 226 press conference, he freaking slipped while getting out of his chair. Honestly, that was pretty freaking scary. Felt like that fight could have been called off, but luckily he was all good. But at UFC 230, he may have sneezed his back out, but he still fought anyway as well. But Jesus, man, talk about the dumbest way to get injured.
I sneezed and hurt my back. That's getting old.
Tony Ferguson's LCL. Now, this is a story all about how Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson never fought ever. They were both on a collision course taking out lightweight contenders, but after being matched up 3 times, they were scheduled again at UFC 223. That's when media obligations happened. Then the undefeated electricity cable claimed a first-round stoppage in the form of Tony Ferguson's LCL.
I mean, I was walking to say hi to a Fox crew member, and I slipped on one of those big black thick cords in the production studio.
I mean, Tony had really done himself an injury with this one in a really stupid way. What makes it even more ridiculous is that he had not his shades, but still prescription sunglasses on inside a dark room, which apparently needed some serious cable management.
Dana said he wears those sunglasses indoors. That should happen to everybody that wears sunglasses indoors.
But we lost Tony versus Khabib for a 4th time after the cable incident. And yeah, it was so freaking dumb. I think we'll remember this one forever. Johnny Walker's worm. Who remembers Johnny Walker back in 2018? He came in from the Contender Series and debuted by knocking out Khalil Roundtree, and then he followed up with 15-second KO of Justin Leddett, and then a 38-second flying knee over Misha Serkinov, and honestly, 3 KOs, a light heavyweight, in 2018. People were getting title shots off of that. But the Johnny Walker hype train slowed almost immediately afterwards when he decided to celebrate a little too hard, Johnny. The dude did not even try and break his fall. He just kissed the canvas. I get the whole Batman falling into the push-ups thing, all right? But this weren't even close. Immediately, Johnny's grabbing his arm and shoulder, and no shit, it was dislocated, and he was sidelined for months and had to have surgery. If you're looking at the dumbest ways fighters have injured themselves, I mean, this has to be up there. Merab's brain. Yeah, okay, so you might have seen Merab Dvalishvili on social media. He's done some crazy shit, attacking drywalls with spinning kicks, standing on the edges of very high places up, but he does love a bit of nature. I mean, maybe you'll find him shadowboxing in the rain. Or find a nice spot, a nice pond filled with icy water, the perfect thing for him to dive into to really maximise his cold weather training. Yeah, it turns out that pond was still frozen and Merab had probably done one of the stupidest things caught on camera and now needed 17 staples in his head to put it back together.
What a stupid accident.
Of course, he went back as soon as he could to destroy the pond with ground and pound, because we all know ref stoppages don't really count.
Yes, I'm the winner, the champion.
And finally, Bryce Mitchell's nutsack. Yeah, that's right. Okay, if you don't know the story of Arkansas's finest thug nasty, he had a run-in with a power tool that did terrible things to his downstairs. Now, we've come a long way in this video from USADA piss cups, and this is where we've ended up, all right? DIY Bryce was building a roof when the dumbest thing happened.
You know, decided I needed 2 hands to hold this board properly, and I put the drill in my pants, and the sumbitch goes off. And man, it was terrible.
As you can imagine, Bryce was still now stuck up on this ladder, and it was like a scene out of American Pie.
At first, I thought it ripped my wiener off. I was thinking, man, if this ripped my wiener off, I'm just gonna die. It's okay, you know. I remember seeing my nuts wrapped up, and there was blood and semen leaking, and there was like, I could see a testicle wrapped up.
Honestly, my God, could you even imagine? Anyway, Bryce managed to get himself down and get to a hospital, driving himself, holding his nuts in one hand.
When I got to the hospital, the nurses was out there talking shit. That's what made me mad. I could hear him. He drilled his nuts up. What an idiot. He's an idiot.
I mean, what else are they gonna say? How dumb was this? I mean, I think it speaks for itself.
You put it into your pants. That's right.
Yeah, I didn't
have
a tool belt. Yeah, I didn't have a tool belt. That's where I fucked up.
All right, I know what you're thinking. Just when you thought MMA couldn't get any stupider, we went ahead and made a video like this. Shout out to Max Randall. He edited this video and made it very special. You can check him out at Max_Randall on social media. He's even got a new YouTube channel that you might want to see. Big thank you to all you Hall of Famers out there for supporting the channel each and every month. We appreciate you guys. If you want to join them, you can find out more in the description down below. Lots of cool stuff. If you become a channel member, just $2.99. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up and a subscribe. If you want to see more from us, we do a lot of videos every single week at this point, a lot of them. Yeah, we'll see you in the next video. All right, cheers, thank you.